So the Cleveland Browns, the Baker Mayfield saga, ultimately ended up headed out to Carolina Panthers. They signed Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson had his own issues. We'll say that. We've covered it in plenty of other episodes. Basically, we have no idea if Deshaun Watson's even going to play. But we're going to roll up and we're going to throw up the Browns depth chart here. The Cleveland Browns, starting quarterback Deshaun Watson. Is he going to start? Who knows? We don't think he will. But, they got Jacoby Brissett, a very capable quarterback, to say the least. Two of the best running backs you can possibly get in the fantasy league with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Probably one of the better receivers in Amari Cooper. And then we have Donovan Peoples-Jones as probably somebody that you might need to look out for. And then David Njoku. He'll probably be somebody starting tight end at some point in their fantasy league, whether they draft him or not. But let's just talk about the draft expectations fantasy-wise when it comes to drafting a Cleveland Browns player, and what's the outlook moving forward if you decide to take a Cleveland Browns player?
Yeah, I can start off. I'm not high on the Browns. I think there's only 3 players on their depth chart that really should be drafted. There's a couple more that have potential. I'm not touching a quarterback. I'm not drafting Watson. I'm not drafting Brissett if Watson's out. We're supposed to hear something. I think news broke today that the NFL's ruling is supposed to come out tomorrow on what his suspension will look like. But it really doesn't matter to me. If he gets 8 games, I'm not drafting him for half a season. I might pick him up, but I just don't think he's worth it. In the running back room, I really don't think he has much of an impact. I got Nick Chubb. I'm a little lower on Chubb than most. I have him like running back 17. I think he's a solid RB2. He hasn't eclipsed 300 touches in a couple years since Kareem Hunt got there, and I never think he will get back to that RB1 status while Hunt is in Cleveland. But moving right on to Kareem Hunt while we're talking about him, I think he can be a flex play for you. He's the guy I'm targeting in this backfield. I'm not drafting him over Chubb, but at the value you can get him for, I'd rather have Hunt. I think that he's a lock to be your running back 1 if Chubb goes down. He's that type of guy. There's a few of them, A.J. Dillon, Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt, maybe Alexander Madison, and the list stops. Like, those are the backups that you want to draft, and those are the guys I'm looking for at that point later on, running back 29. So he's your RB3 flex play. You have him on the bench. I think he's the one on this team that I would be trying to get.
I would disagree with you. I think Chubb is an RB1. I think he proved it last year whenever Hunt went down, but that is, stick my foot in my mouth moment there because Kareem Hunt was down, and that's when Nick Chubb became an RB1. So the talent is definitely there, but I would agree with you. I think he's still an RB1. I look at him as, a early second-round pick in most of the leagues that I'm in, but forward, we have differing opinions, and that's why I'll probably end up with Nick Chubb if he's not a keeper in our league. So
that's one thing. I'd look at fantasy a little different because Nick Chubb, we talked about him in our running back show a while back. Like, he's in the conversation for top 5 in the NFL. But in fantasy, the number one thing to me is opportunity. And that's not just, is he going to be your starter every week? I look at that, especially from a running back perspective. I look at 2 things, your carries and your targets. How many times is your team looking to get you the ball? And Chubb, this year he's projected to have 240 carries and 30 targets. Like, that's not going to do it to me when you have guys, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey can push 400. They're getting the ball that much more. I just don't think Chubb has the ceiling that everybody else does, and that keeps him. He has to be perfect to be an RB1 with the usage he gets.
I agree, but it is what it is.
Yeah, taking a look. I mean, the running back situation in Cleveland is definitely interesting, right? Especially when you don't know who the quarterback is. I think if you have Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, starting day one, which, again, we don't know what's going to happen with that. I think your running back for the Cleveland Browns becomes less valuable because he does like to throw the ball. He's a stat getter. And with a surefire number one receiver with Amari Cooper, he has somebody to actually throw it to. But if Deshaun Watson cannot play and it's Jacoby Brissett, they're going to rely heavy on that run game. I think picking up one or if not both of them and piggyback off each other there in the draft is probably the smartest bet. If you're going to draft one of the running backs, you might as well try to go after both of them because they're both really good players and they're both really going to be the workhorses of that offense. As you can see, like if you look at the wide receiver room, you have Amari Cooper, and then you have Donovan Peoples-Jones, who is an under the radar receiver on most people's draft boards, but he's a guy that I think is going to be a really good number two and probably have a coming of age type season that he's really going to open some eyes and he's going to find himself on some people's starting lineups every week. But the Browns they're weird, man. Sometimes you think they might show up and win 8-9 games. Sometimes they might show up and not really play good at all and end up winning 4. But with that being said, who knows? Another interesting draft pick would maybe be David Njoku. Like we said, if you have tight ends being drafted, you may not even draft a tight end to one of your last rounds if you don't get one of the top picks. So, I mean, the tight ends listed across the bottom here, we got Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson, Dalton Schultz, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, and then finally Mike Gesicki from Miami, which we talked about last week. You're not going to have, outside of that top 3 or 4, very valuable tight ends in your lineup every week. Is Njoku even a draft pick in most leagues? Probably not. I would say probably not. If you've got somebody that, I don't know, if you got 12 teams in the league, yeah, he'd probably get drafted. But he's not going to be taken before any of those guys, and I can guarantee that. If he does in your league, you probably got a good chance of beating whoever took him. So, with that being said, any last parting words on the Browns? Like we said, I don't think the Browns they're not going to be terrible, and then it all depends on the quarterback situation, honestly. But it'll be interesting to see what they do at quarterback.
Well, I think this question is Brissett better than Baker Mayfield? Can the Browns win more games with Jacoby Brissett than Baker Mayfield?
I don't think he's worse. That's where I'm at. I mean, Baker wasn't winning you games, and I don't think Brissett's going to go out there and win you games. Can they be? What were they? 9-7 last year, I think.
Something like that.
9-8, somewhere in that range.
500 somewhere. Yeah,
Jacoby Brissett can have the Browns at 9-8. Wouldn't shock me a bit. I don't think he's going to take them 12-5. I don't think they're going to win that division with him. With Watson, it's a completely different conversation. But, I mean, in my opinion, hopefully we don't see Watson this season. I mean, I think that's what needs to happen. But just talking about that quarterback carousel there, I think Frank had a good call out on Donovan Peoples-Jones. I don't think he's draftable if Watson's out for the year. If Watson plays, I think Peoples-Jones could be one of those guys that's on a lot of rosters that win leagues. He's a big play guy. He had flashes last season, had a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game, 34 catches, almost 600 yards. So the guy was averaging 20 yards a catch with Baker. And that big play threat, that's not what Cooper is. He's a great receiver. He's not the big play guy. I think that he could really have an outstanding year if they have Watson. So even if they get him the second half of the season, that's a name to keep on your radar, keep on your watch list. Pick him up a couple weeks before Watson becomes available to play, and I think he could really shock some people this season.